Alright, let's keep on going here. I want to show you what I worked on. Got the front hatch. I've secured a ladder, which is going to add some really nice realism in there. So this is in the front hatch right in front of the wheelhouse. What I've also done is I've covered up the grating for the wheelhouse floor with some tape just to make sure that no granules or crumblies get in there, because it'll be obviously quite difficult to clean out the inside of the wheelhouse. What I've done is I've actually secured the floor with just a few spots of CA. If it ever happens that the owner needs to get in there to maintain or update the interior, that can be cut with an X-Acto knife and the floor removed. What I've also done is I've created these chocks, and these are angled. You can see that they match the contour of the lower hull. And the idea behind this is that once the upper hull is put onto the lower hull, the chocks will ensure that the edges line up all the way across. So these were all put in and spaced and ground so that the edges all line up. And it's a little tricky because you can see, just looking at here, you've got relatively thin spots, about 1/8 of an inch, all the way up to areas that are almost 1/4 of an inch. So with the varying thicknesses, you need to make sure that your chocks or your braces line up the outside edges perfectly. So you can see that for the most part it was the upper hull that needed to be squeezed in, except for the back here on the lower hull. So I put the braces in the lower hull here. So what my plan is, from this point I'm actually going to begin work on the Salon interior. I'm going to start painting up and detailing that. You can see that I've primed the settee couches, and we will move on to detailing out the Salon interior. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, let's take a look at where I'm at now. It's actually been quite a few days since my last update. I got some work around the house that I've been working on, but I have managed to make a little bit of progress on the Salon interior. As you can see, I have primed and painted the ballast tube arrangement for the Salon, as well as the Salon floor itself. Something that you'll also notice here is I've notched out the ballast pipes. And I actually had to do that in order for the actuation mechanism for the breathers to fit. Fortunately, when you take a look at the Salon interior from this angle, as it will be viewed, of course that's all invisible, so you won't be able to see it. So, got the base coat on there. I also did a little bit of dry brushing on the inside ballast tubes with some silver, so you can see the detail a little better. The couches, the teardrop couches, have all been painted and highlighted in gold. I've got my settee couches. Those are all complete now as well. And I'm moving on to the floor area. So from here again, I've dry brushed the silver just to bring out the highlights of the detail of the stair area. These are actually supposed to be Persian rugs, and these actually are silk woven rugs from Turkey. So I ordered these online. They're really quite inexpensive, absolutely beautiful. So these are going to be set inside the Salon area and stuck down with some two-sided tape. So we'll have some real Persian rugs inside the Salon area. I think from here, next what I'm going to concentrate on is detailing up the pipe organ. We'll get that set in its proper place within the Salon area, and as you saw in some of my earlier videos, also have the specimen table complete, which I finished up earlier. So it's coming together really well. It should go rather quickly. I'm going to get this all set in place and everything put down permanently, and then we're going to move on to the hull again. Alright, here is a little bit more picking at the model. You can see that I have attached the raker arch and the upper rakers right here. You'll notice that these rakers, when you flip them over on the inside channel, there's actually dimples that Jim put into the castings. 1, 2, 3, and 4, just so that you get the order right. There is subtle difference in regard to the tip of the rakers and how they join up with each other. So I've actually, the kit was missing the hatch, the camera obscura hatch on the top, and I've actually utilized the hatch from 31-inch Nautilus, and it works just perfectly in there. I used a bolt, a metric bolt, to get the look of the spring in there. I've installed the ballast vents up on the top there, and actually what I am going to be working on next is the photo etch brass grating, deck grating, and those just fit perfectly into the slots in the upper deck. And what you're going to need to make sure that you do, just like in the Wheelhouse, you can see I've roughed up the bonding edges of the lower part of this grate with my Dremel tool, and that's just going to make sure that they adhere really, really well to the model itself. So basically what I'm going to be ending up doing is just putting this in place like this, use some thin CA right at the corners, and through capillary action that is going to bond the grating in place. Absolutely beautiful photo etch details in this Generation 3 kit. Okay, let's take a look at the side keels. You can see that I've started the installation of the starboard side, front side keel. These are actually a little bit of work to get right. The contour of the side keels doesn't quite match up to the hull as they come, but fear not, it is a fairly simple, if somewhat involved, procedure to get it looking right. So you can see that I've actually just used some CA to adhere the rear part of the keel to the side of the hull, and it's not quite matching up here, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a heat gun and going to heat up the side keel and get that perfect contour in there. And once that's all done, after I've CA'd it in place, I'm going to use some screws to make sure that it's 100% secure to the main body of the hull. Alright, now we can see that the side keel has been adhered to the hull. It is conforming to the contour of it quite well. And it's just held on with CA right now. I am going to use, as I said, some screws to make sure that it's held in place really, really well. Now the other thing I want you to note is a modification that I did on the side keel. I want to have access to the inside of the hull after the model is complete, and that is obviously quite a tricky thing. If you take a look at these keels from the side, you can see that they're actually V-shaped, you know, like that, which means that they wrap around the lower hull, and that means that once these are on, you can't get the top hull off the lower hull. So what I've done is I've used the Dremel to flatten out the lower edge of the keel so that the upper hull can sit down onto the lower hull and it'll just slip in place. Now what I'm going to be left with is a little, probably 1/16 of an inch gap, but that's under the side keel. You really won't be able to see it. The trade-off, of course, being that you will have full access to the interior of the model at a later date if something were to break or need modification for whatever reason. So I'll go into that a little bit later in more detail, but for now that's what we're working on. Alright, I'm going to apologize if I'm jumping around, but this is kind of the way that I work. I jump from project to project as solutions present themselves in my mind, but I decided to tackle the ram because I've got the side keels going on, and of course this is another major exterior feature of the Nautilus. This is the stock ram bulb that comes with the kit. I've cut off the back section, and it was just slightly smaller diameter than this exterior section, and the challenge with that is that on the inside of the hull it's quite a narrow cross section in here, so you can see wouldn't leave a lot of meat left if I were to hog that out with my Dremel tool, which again is certainly possible, but I find this to be a better solution. So what I've done, as I said, I've cut off the rear section of the ram, and what I've got here is just a section of steel rod. I bored this out to 7/16 inch diameter. This slips right in, and there's a tiny bit of play here, and that'll give the option of tweaking the angle that this goes in the front to make sure that it's just perfect. So I'm going to use a little bit of rubber CA to adhere it to the inside, and then I'm going to use the same adhesive on the inside of the hull, and theoretically speaking, once this is in place, it should be all lined up and nice and strong and secure. Alright, you can see that I have all of the side keels mounted. This side here has been CA'd as well as primed, just so I can catch some of the gaps and such. The front is all done. I worked onto the back. I just wanted to show you, for the most part, this seam is actually really tight. It works out really well, but you can see that I've had to use a little bit of filler here, and if you do need to use some, I recommend this Squadron green putty. And what I do is I just use a simple flathead screwdriver, press it into the seam, and then you use a rag, dampen it down with a little bit of acetone, and just rub it down. And what that does is smooths it all out, brings back the rivet detail in there so that you're not obscuring that, and gives you a nice clean seam all the way up. So I'm going to have to reprime that, obviously. I'm also going to need to do a little bit of work in the back, and this is one of the failings of the kit. You can see that the side keel is actually about 1/4 of an inch too short. It's not a huge deal. I'm going to use a little bit of 1/4 inch plastic stock. I'm going to bring that back to the edge there, but I wanted to show you what I'm going to do here. I've got the prop shroud pieces. These are white metal. And the idea is I want to make sure that these are perfectly round, so that I don't have an oblong mounting in there. I'm not going to count on the scribe marks in the back being accurate. So basically what I'm going to do here, I'm going to use some calipers, take a measurement of the thickness of the keel at the mounting points. I'm going to go back and draw a circle with my compass, and we'll make sure that our pieces all line up. Okay, here you can see my crude diagram. I've got the keel section in the center, and what I got was a width that averaged out to about 13.3 on the top and about 12.9 on the bottom, so I figured 13 millimeters is about a good average for the two sides. And then I drew some concentric circles in there until I got precisely on the inside edge of the pieces, and that worked out to 90 millimeters in case you wanted to space yours out. So the inside diameter, 90 millimeters. I bent my white metal pieces, which is actually quite easy to do, so that they're perfect circles, and now I'm going to work on mounting them on the rear. Alright, as you can see, I have destructed my prop shroud. I've used my razor saw here to cut the prop shroud on a diagonal. The razor saw is extremely thin and sharp, and so I didn't really lose any material thickness on the inside. Now you may be wondering why I did that. And this all feeds back to the point that I want to retain access to the interior of the model. So if we take a look at the back here, you can see that if I were to split the model, pull the top off, if the shroud goes all the way to the bottom, unfortunately, it will be adhered here and it would not allow me to do so. So what I'm going to do, I took my prop shroud and I cut it with my razor saw. So I'm basically going to adhere it into place like so, and with the support strut in place it will be nice and secure, and you'll see just a little bit of a micro seam in there if you were to get probably within a foot of the model and look very, very closely. So again, what that'll allow me to do is retain access to the interior and still allow me to have the prop shroud in place without having to remove it. Alright, it is the morning of Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody. I am going to finish this section of blog this morning, just give you an update of where I'm at. All the side keels have been attached, seams have been filled for the most part, still got a little bit to do. I've mounted the prop shroud. You can see just that really, really thin seam in there, and I think once we get some paint on there you won't actually see it. So I've got to add some filler pieces in here to bring the back flush with the rear of the hull, but that should not pose a very big issue. Mounted my cleats and bollards on the upper hull. I have also secured the hull together using 4 screws, and you can actually see them underneath right here. And this is what's going to keep the hull secured together. And again, once this is painted, you'll never see those screws unless you look really, really closely. It was a compromise that needed to be made in order to keep access to the interior. Of course, if that wasn't an issue, I would simply glue it together and make sure that the seams were all good. After I had this secured down, I took my orbital sander and I sanded this perfectly flush, and what that's going to do is going to allow the installation of the outer basils here that'll fit perfectly flush, and these will basically remove, screws come out, top half comes off. So that'll be nice and simple access to the interior, and again the front cleats and bollards are installed. So as of Thanksgiving morning, this is where we're at right now. I think my next steps are going to be to clean up a little bit of the lower hull, start installing the lower hull details such as the spiral speed indicator and scoops and that sort of thing. Then I'm going to return to the lighting on the interior, and we're getting pretty close. So I'll see you in the next edition. Thanks for watching.